Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I thought I'd be doing something a little bit different. I thought I would go through some brainstorming for Babylon Dithers, the next book in the Trevor Knight series. Book 1 is German Derelict. That sets up Iran. Book 2, Egyptian Demise, sets up Egypt. Book 3, Syrian Dander, sets up Syria. Book 4, which is in editing and almost ready to publish, is Ottoman Destiny. That is set in Turkey. Book 5, which is also in editing, is Arabian Dawn, which is in Saudi Arabia. Book 6, which I've yet to really begin in earnest, is Babylon Dithers, which is set in Iraq. And then book 7, everything culminates in Israel in a book called Atlantis Dislodged. And in that book, every country in the region, really, Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, even Sudan may get into it, Syria, Turkey, even Russia up here, they all launch a massive invasion of Israel. So book 7, Atlantis Dislodged, is the culmination of everything that's been happening so far in the series, where all these countries who have been introduced already invade Israel. That is still one book away, however. The next book I need to work on is Babylon Dithers, which is going to set up Iraq. I have been trying to work on this book for a few years. I'd brainstorm it. I'd even begin writing it, and I just run into problems. I've never done a writing video before on YouTube. I've just done editing explained videos, but never writing explained videos. I've never actually shown you guys my brainstorming process. So I thought I'd try it for this video and this book, Babylon Dithers. So of course every title in the series kind of is 2 words. The second word begins with D. Don't ask why, it's just something I wanted to do. German Derelict, Egyptian Demise, Syrian Dander, Ottoman Destiny, 2 words. The second word begins with D. So Babylon Dithers, the first words kind of set up the location generally. I won't even go into German Derelict and why that's Iran. But, Egyptian Demise, Syrian Dander, Ottoman Destiny, Turkey, Arabian Dawn, So Babylon Dithers, basically Babylon is historically in Iraq. I don't think it's over where modern Baghdad is. Let's take a look. I think Babylon is near Baghdad, but not directly. Babylon versus Baghdad. So yeah, this shows about where it is. It's a few miles to the south. Probably, I don't even know what that may be, 75 or 100 miles or so south of Baghdad. But anyway, Babylon is kind of, a metaphorical term or whatever for Iraq. So that kind of lets you know this book is set in Iraq. And the word dithers definition. Dithers means to be indecisive. And kind of why that is because a large part of the plot of the book is supposed to be about the Kurds in northern Iraq. And Trevor Knight is kind of wanting them to be independent. And that has largely been set up in Syrian Dander when he sides with the Kurds in the defense of Kobane, which would be, I think it'd be over here. Oh, there it is. There's Kobane. I thought it was directly north of Raqqa, but I guess not. Anyway, so there's Kobane. In Syrian Dander, Trevor spends a good portion of his time with the Kurds there. Kind of Act 4 of Syrian Dander is about the Kurds fighting ISIS in this town, Kobane, which is based on a real event. And so it's from there that Trevor really likes the Kurds. And so here in book 6, he here's the ISIS, his kind of old arch enemy here in Syria. They are marching into Iraq and they are taking over Iraq. This is set, I think, in 2014, early 2014. And it's based on history. At that time, ISIS was really sweeping across northern Iraq. They took the town of Mosul and they got all the way to this town here, Samarra. That's like as far as they advanced, like within 75 or 50 miles of Baghdad. That ISIS was that close to taking over Baghdad and probably taking over all of Iraq. And so what happens at the end of Arabian Dawn, Trevor Knight hears that ISIS is on the march and taking over Mosul and stuff. So at the end of Arabian Dawn, Trevor decides to go to Iraq because he wants to help the Kurds against ISIS. But this is where the title Babylon Dithers comes in. So Trevor, from his time in Syria, he is used to the Kurds like standing up against ISIS. So he likes the Kurds. They are like good people, you know, they're fighters, and they have a lot of like female fighters, and he really respects that. So Trevor goes to Iraq thinking like, oh, I'm good buddies with the Kurds, you know, I like them, they're good fighters. I'll go to Iraq and help them, you know, fight back ISIS. But when he gets there, he discovers that Iraqi Kurds are not the same as like the Syrian variety. The Syrian variety were like all aboard for fighting ISIS. But the Iraq variety of the Kurds often tends to just flee from ISIS and just leave like minorities, like especially Christians and stuff, and also women. They just leave them like to ISIS, and the Kurds just flee. And so Trevor is just kind of like, why aren't you guys standing and fighting? So it's different types of Kurds. And anyway, so what happens in the book is Trevor is kind of pushing the Kurds in Iraq both to fight ISIS and also to go independent and have their own country. But what happens is he finds out the Kurds in Iraq are not so keen about fighting for their independence. And there's one Kurdish family in particular who is really influential and powerful in Iraq. And they are kind of more interested in keeping their own political power in Iraq rather than having independence for Kurds. So the title Babylon Dithers is kind of about the Kurds in Iraq struggling to decide whether they will stand up for themselves and fight for independence and fight for freedom and fight for like minority rights and stuff, or whether they're going to be cowards and whether they're going to be corrupt and care about their own selfish interests and whatnot. So that's where the title Babylon Dithers comes in. So it's basically like the Kurds in Iraq are really indecisive. So I had previously actually started to write Babylon Dithers. So you could see right down here, I already have 12,000 words, just about 50 pages, where I wrote, I don't know exactly how much I did, if I did the first act or what. And I also did an outline where I just kind of have all kinds of notes and stuff for myself for pretty much the whole book. So to just tell you guys about my ideas for the book. So usually for the Trevor Knight series, there's always been 4 acts for each book. And so I was thinking of just keeping with that same format. So Act 1 of Babylon Dithers is supposed to be about the campaign of ISIS, like taking over Mosul and advancing down closer toward Baghdad. So this has kind of gone through several iterations because I'd like begin writing something and then for some reason or another have some kind of problem with it. I've gotten all the way to Act 4 of the book in planning and brainstorming and outlining and all that. But then I just kind of run into problems. So basically the consensus of each iteration or whatever, basically where I'm currently at, and this is where each like version has been in some way, shape, or form this same basic idea. Basically, Act 1 is about Trevor fighting to liberate Mosul because Mosul is captured in the early chapters of the book. And what happens is ISIS takes a Turkish, I think, diplomatic crew hostage. And so what winds up happening is the Turkish president, who is named Bayati, who of course you hear a lot about him from the book Ottoman Destiny, which is all about Turkey. He decides to hire a group called Satire, or the Satire Force, or whatever, which is a counter-terrorist group that was founded by Samuel Creed, who is the protagonist of my other series, the Samuel Creed series. And I don't really want to go into it too much, but I mean, this is all stuff that kind of Ottoman Destiny sets up. But anyway, like, to give you just like the very gist of the idea, the Satire Force is founded by Samuel Creed, who lives in Washington, D.C., and also by Hassan. He's this Moroccan guy. And they recruit special forces from around the world, and they accept bounties and stuff on terrorists largely. And so what Bayadi suggests is hiring the Satire Force to liberate their consulate crew or whatever in Mosul. So Samuel Creed agrees to that. So he dispatches the Satire Force. And that's so funny saying that. But satire means, hang on, just let me pull up something here. Satire is the Special Anti-Terrorist Immediate Response Echelon. Wow, I actually spelled echelon right. S-A-T-I-R-E, Satire Force. So yeah, it's a counterterrorism group. And the reason I named it that is it's actually a parody of Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy has a group called Rainbow Six. So I wanted to have a group that was named similar to that. So I wanted to kind of make fun of it. So what better way to make fun of it than by calling it the Satire Force? So yeah, it's kind of based on Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six. But anyway, so Samuel Creed does send the Satire Force to Mosul, and one way or another, they wind up coming into trouble. Like, I think their helicopter, which is their extraction, gets shot down. So they have to, take refuge in some kind of an oil facility or whatever. And this is kind of based on real life. In the actual, fall of Mosul in 2014, some group or another occupied an oil refinery and they were holding out against ISIS. So when I read that real life tidbit, I thought, ooh, that could be the Satire Force. So they could be holding out in this oil refinery from ISIS. And so what happens is Trevor Knight shows up in Iraq from Saudi Arabia. He goes from Saudi Arabia to Iraq. And one of the first things he finds out is that this Satire Force group is pinned down in this refinery up in Mosul. And Trevor's in Baghdad. So what he winds up doing is he wants to, see who can help the Satire Force, who's, isolated. The Americans don't want to help because the Americans have all withdrawn from Iraq. The Iraqi government isn't able to help. So Trevor actually decides, his father, who is in town at the time, I don't know exactly how it happens, but they mentioned that Iran has a military wing in Baghdad. And so Trevor is well, I'll just ask the Iranians to help. And this is kind of where Trevor's personality is, where Trevor, I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, this is just basically consistent with Trevor's character, where he wants to help the Satire Force, and he hears that Iran has this special forces group in Baghdad at the time. So Trevor's just well, I don't like the Iranians, but, hey, I'll at least ask if they can help. I mean, why not? So I had a scene where Trevor meets with this commander of the Iranian Special Forces group in Baghdad. And what happens in that scene, and this is already written, I think, in this first draft here. I believe it's all already there. What happens is the Iranian military guy tells Trevor, okay, well, we might be willing to do this for you. And there's more reasons for it, which I don't want to go into. But he basically says to Trevor that, okay, I will do this for you if you run these weapons or whatever that we have to the Kurds, because the Iranians kind of want to send some military assistance to the Kurds. And I don't really want to go into that here again, because that'd just take forever. And so what was going to happen was Trevor was going to take that shipment of weapons or whatever to some kind of town. I don't remember which one, because I was trying to have it be like a real life city where ISIS was really moving into that city. And anyway, so Trevor was going to go there, and that's like his first contact with the Iraqi Kurds. And again, I don't want to go into too much of what happens. But anyway, at the end of Act 1, it would basically culminate with the Iraqi government and the Iranian special forces, and maybe some Kurds like moving on Mosul and maybe retaking Mosul from Islamic State. So that's essentially Act 1. Act 2 is supposed to be about a campaign kind of more to the north, where there's a battle for the Mosul Dam, which is somewhere here, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, there's the Mosul Dam somewhere up there, and there's kind of a battle going on for that. And also there's a real life, what was happening was there were a lot of, I don't know how to say it, Yazidi Christians, I think they're kind of minorities. They were pinned down in these mountains somewhere up here. And so what happens is Trevor Knight is supposed to be running like aid to them. And also there's supposed to be this like fight over this Mosul dam, because they're worried that like ISIS may blow up the dam. And if they do, it could flood like all the way through Iraq, and like basically a million or millions of people could die. It'd just be catastrophic flooding. And the dam in Mosul is kind of like famously in poor shape. So in fact, something I was kind of thinking about doing was, since Trevor is an engineer, I was going to consider that maybe Trevor Knight actually, like, I think ISIS controls like one side of the dam, and the Iraqis or Kurds or whoever controls the other side. And I was going to think that maybe Trevor will actually decide to like drain this lake here. And this is like a real life idea, is because that dam could be so catastrophic if it fails. There's been kind of like talk that maybe they should just drain this whole lake, because if that dam fails, it's going to like be catastrophic for the entire country. But if you drain that lake, that will also like massively like degrade Iraq's like power situation. And of course, like all their kind of farmland and stuff, a lot of them depend on that water. So I was really iffy about doing that, because that was just another idea for Trevor's personality. Like, having to choose between the dam potentially failing and a million people dying, or just draining the lake and just saying, screw it. I'm not going to let this dam, blow up and kill everyone. I'm going to drain this lake. And also Trevor is an engineer, so he would kind of know how to do that. But I don't know if I want to do that or not, because again, it just seems like, that's a real bad choice for Trevor to do. And historically, that did not happen. Like the Iraqis retook the dam and everything was fine, So I don't know if I want to do that, but that is an idea. But anyway, so Act 2, Trevor winds up, running aid to these people who are stranded somewhere up here in the north. But anyway, that's kind of Act 2. And then Act 3 of the book, since like not a lot of action happened after that for a while. I mean, the next major thing that happened in Iraq is that the Kurds had a referendum for independence, which is, of course, going to be a major part in the book because it's about the Kurds, and Trevor wants the Kurds to push for independence, which did really happen, but it didn't happen for a few months after all this stuff about like Mosul and the fighting around the Mosul dam and stuff. there was a several month gap. So in the meantime, what Trevor was going to do was Trevor was going to go into Syria because the ISIS is fighting the Kurds in Syria. And so Trevor was going to go into Syria and kind of help them to push back ISIS, because ISIS has kind of been struggling in Syria. And that's kind of why they've been pushing into Iraq, is because they've been having trouble in Syria. So Iraq has kind of been an easier target for them recently. And so Trevor was going to go to Syria, and I didn't really plan it out too much, but there's a lot that can happen. And I was looking up like historically what was really happening in 2014, because there's a lot of fighting around this time. And so one of the things that's going on is the Kurds are advancing on Raqqa, which is the Islamic State capital. And also there's all kinds of ISIS holdouts somewhere in Syria. And another thing is that I may want to show is in real life, pretty recently, Turkish-backed rebels in Syria have pretty much captured the country. And so I could also set that up where these Turkish-backed rebels are really gaining momentum here in Western Syria. But I don't know. I don't really know if I want to do that, because I'd kind of like to keep the focus on ISIS. And yeah, so I think Trevor would probably be fighting ISIS somewhere here in Syria. That would be Act 3. But also I could still incorporate some way about, the Turkish-backed group, because they're going to wind up taking over a good chunk of Syria. So I don't know exactly how I'll do that. But anyway, Act 3 is basically in Syria and Trevor fighting ISIS in Syria. And then Act 4 would move back to Iraq, because they're having that referendum for independence, which again is based on real life. They really did that. And so Act 4 would show kind of Trevor's interaction. I'm sorry, I should probably quit moving my mouse. I may make you like motion sick or something. Act 4, Trevor is going to interact with the Kurds and be pushing for them to gain independence. So just to show you guys kind of like my rough outline I have here. Oh, in fact, here I say battle for Al-Tabqa Air Base in Syria. So again, this is all just kind of, a rough draft. But yeah, that's like a real life battle. And so I was thinking, that could make an interesting flow of events or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened around that battle that I could have Trevor do. So Act 4 is about the Iraqi Kurdish referendum based on real events. And so historically what happens, and I think I'll keep pretty true to this in the book, the Kurds move to vote for independence. And the Iraqi government basically says, oh, no, you don't. So they move the military against the Kurds. And I think they really attack, I think the town of or whatever. I think that's a major economic town for the Kurds in northern Iraq. And so I think the Turkish military moves into there, and they begin taking over chunks of northern Iraq from the Kurds. And the Kurds kind of largely decide hey, we wanted independence, but we don't really want it bad enough to, fight the Iraqi army and all that. So they kind of get bossed around, and the Iraqi military kind of shows up in force, and, they really cause the Kurds to back down and be like, okay, hang on. Well, we don't have to be independent. We can stay. So this is where a corrupt Kurdish family comes into the book. So the plot of the book, Babylon Dithers, is supposed to be about Trevor's relationship kind of with this family in northern Iraq, this real influential Kurdish family who kind of has a lot of political positions in the Iraqi government and like the Kurdish region and stuff. So this Iraqi Kurdish family is like really powerful, and they're kind of pushing for independence, but basically this family is kind of more interested in their own power and position rather than Kurdish nationalism or whatever. So Trevor kind of has problems with them because, again, they're just more interested in their own family's position rather than what's best for the Kurds. And so that's supposed to be a theme of Act 4, is Trevor like trying to push a couple guys in this family to like step up and be like, come on, you gotta, be independent, you gotta fight for this, you gotta fight for your people. And so somewhere here I have like a list of all like Kurdish names, and these are all based on real people. And like the reason I say like not Dilo or whatever is because like these are all historical names, like last names. So I say not Dilo because that's like a real person, Dilo Doxian or whatever. So what I like do is I combine names like Marwan Doxian, and bam, there's a name, based on real names. So real Kurdish first names, real Kurdish last names, and then I combine them and I have a name. So yeah, that's how I come up with a lot of names. This is kind of funny. Trevor can mistake the name for a woman. Shamil sounds like a girl's name. Nope, it's not a girl, it's a male. Anyway, so these are kind of like meant to be the family. So I think this is the name of the main Kurdish family, the Malazada family, and they're based on a real Kurdish family in Iraq, but it's just fictionalized name and all that. So I think this family, the Malazada family, is the powerful kind of corrupt family. And so there's several members of this family, and in fact I may like double or triple it from this. But one of them is like the current leader of Iraqi Kurdistan, and one of them is his son. I think it's this guy Malik. Future president of Kurdistan, Malik. So kind of my idea for Act 4 is Trevor may be meeting with his guy Malik Malazada. He's kind of like, the presumptive heir of this family, So Trevor knows this guy is probably going to be the future president, the future leader of his family. So Trevor really kind of pushes this guy to, fight for independence and to be a good guy. But also there's this guy Firat Malazada, leader of Kurdish special forces. I think we might meet this guy in Act 1, where the ISIS is moving all across northern Iraq. I think this guy Firat, he is already fighting. He is leader of the Kurdish special forces, so he is already like a dedicated fighter. So Trevor meets this guy presumably at some point, maybe in the first act, maybe in the second act, and he's like, hey, this is a good guy. But I think this guy Firat, he may not really have political aspirations. He may not be much of a leader so much. He may be a good battlefield leader, but he may not be like a political leader. The political leader is clearly this guy Malik. And so for Act 4, it's supposed to be about Trevor interacting with this Malazada family largely because they're the ones kind of in power, and he's pushing them to support independence, which really does not happen in this book. They wind up backing down. The Kurds wind up backing down. So independence for the Kurds will have to wait. And so how the book ends is Trevor kind of decides like, screw you guys, you Iraqi Kurds. I'm tired of you guys. I'm trying to help you guys gain independence, but you just don't want it. You don't want to fight for it. This family is corrupt. So Trevor winds up going back to Syria at the end of Babylon Dithers. And so he rejoins the Kurds in Syria to make the final push to defeat ISIS. because ISIS is basically down to like their final town or two in Syria. So Trevor's like, okay, screw you, Iraqi Kurds. I don't really like you guys. You're not ready for independence. You're not ready to fight for it. So I'm going to go back to the Syrian Kurds who are fighting for independence, and I'm going to help them. I'm going to defeat ISIS. These are more my people, these Syrian Kurds. I'm going back to them. I'm rejoining them. And so then in Atlantis Dislodged, Hamas, here I'll kind of base it largely on like real current events where, October 7th, how there's that terrorist attack where Hamas captures a lot of people. Two of the people actually I think they'll capture are Alfred Russell and Tugchi, who is a character from Ottoman Destiny. Hamas will, I think, capture both of them. And so Kate Creed will be kind of sent to look for Trevor because there's kind of reports about an American in Syria who is kind of like fighting ISIS, and he's really wanted by ISIS, because in Syrian Dander, Trevor helps to kill the leader of ISIS. So ISIS really wants to kill Trevor. I mean, he's like public enemy number one for them. He's their like number one target. They hate Trevor. So Kate Creed hears that Trevor may be back in Syria. And again, I don't want to go into it, but something major happens in Ottoman Destiny where Kate Creed basically decides she doesn't want to have anything more to do with Trevor. She doesn't want to be friends with him anymore. She says, like, I never want to see you again. So that is book 4. And so here in book 7, Atlantis Dislodged, Kate is like, hey, Alfred Russell, Trevor Knight's best friend, is taken captive. So she goes to Syria to look for Trevor to bring him back because Trevor's like, hey, Hamas has Alfred, captive, so she tries to like get Trevor to come back and help if he can. So it's a real kind of emotional meeting for Kate and Trevor because the last time they met was on really bad terms. So that's kind of how Babylon Dithers ends, with Trevor going back to Syria to fight ISIS. And that leads into book 7, where Kate winds up going to Syria to try to find Trevor. So that's how these books link up. So when she goes to Syria, Trevor is still helping the Kurds to, wipe out ISIS. Isn't my boy Nibbler here so cute? So anyway, so now I kind of can like begin to go through my actual issues I've been having with Babylon Dithers. Thank you, baby. I don't know if you heard him. But anyway, so, okay, now, first issue kind of with the Act 1 or whatever. So Act 1, the fall of Mosul is originally, or I don't know how to say it exactly, but in these like various drafts I've been trying to do, one problem I've had is that I've had like several chapters showing the fall of Mosul. So for one, there's a storyline about this Iraqi general and his like storyline for the fall of Mosul. So what's happening with him, basically he gets, kind of stranded in the city, and he kind of has to like fight his way out with, a small group of Iraqi soldiers, and they have to like get out of Mosul. And this general who is set up, that I've just been talking about, he comes back into the book in Act 4 because he is the main Iraqi general who like is sent to move on the Kurds, like, attack the town of Kirk or whatever. So he's like their main general, the main Iraqi general. And so that was kind of like setting up that character. So you see him in the fall of Mosul, and then you see him again in Act 4. But I had like probably, I don't know how many chapters, maybe like, I don't know if exactly like 5 chapters or whatever, but I mean, there were definitely several scenes setting up that guy. And I just don't think I need that many scenes. I mean, because his only function really is you saw like the fall of Mosul, and then you see him again in Act 4 when he goes to, you know, fight the Kurds and stop the Kurdish referendum. So this is kind of my first problem I've been having with like the outline of the book is that general, the Iraqi general. I think I just had kind of too much dedicated to him. Oh, and here's his name, Sunni General Kadim Kadim Husni. So yeah, he's a Sunni Muslim. You could kind of also just ignore a lot of this. I mean, a lot of this is just kind of like, rough draft outline stuff, which I don't really want to go into. But yeah, this general, so yeah, he was supposed to be set up with the fall of Mosul, and then he appears again in Act 4. But I don't really think I need to dedicate several chapters to him because he's not really a major character. I mean, he's not a vital character to the story. So, I mean, if I have several chapters dedicated to him in Act 1, when people get to Act 4, when readers get to Act 4, they're probably not going to remember this guy. So, should I even have any chapters for him? Because I could just, introduce him, at the end of the book, maybe? I don't know. Basically, this character is really a side character. This Sunni general, Kadim Husni, whatever, I can never pronounce anything. So I think one problem I've been having is I've been kind of trying to plan this with him being a major character. And he's not really a major character. He's more of a side character. And why I say this is a problem, Nibbler is taking a bath right now, so it's really distracting hearing a bird in the background taking a bath. Why this is a problem is because Act 1 is really long. There's a lot of stuff going on. So there's this Iraqi general who's involved. Also, I introduced some Islamic State fighters who may have larger roles as well, like kind of antagonist roles, fighting with Trevor and hunting Trevor. So they could also be set up, showing them capturing Mosul and some other stuff, to just set up these bad guys, these Islamic State fighters. I could still include them. I'm not sure how large of a role they should have, though. And again, they're kind of a little bit closer towards supporting characters. The problem with Act 1 is there's just so many characters I'm trying to set up. Then I have a scene where the Turkish consulate or whatever is attacked and the Turks are taken captive. Then there's a scene with the Turkish president deciding to call the satire force for help. There's a scene where the Iraqi prime minister, I think it's the Iraqi vice president, goes to Saudi Arabia, and that's in the book so far is where Trevor Knight had his first scene. There's just a lot of scenes that happen in Act 1 before Trevor Knight even shows up in Iraq. And that's a problem to me because it's here, if I pull up the actual book, I did a search to show appearances of the name Trevor. He doesn't appear first till chapter 2. And this is a pretty minor scene relatively where this, I think, vice president of Iraq goes to Saudi Arabia. So you actually meet Trevor while he's still in Saudi Arabia, which is kind of an interesting touch, I think. And then you don't meet Trevor again till chapter 5 when he shows up in Iraq. So you see chapter 2, this is basically, it's not the first page of the book, but I mean, it's page 15 is Trevor's first appearance, and then he appears again page 32. That's just kind of quite a while, not really appearing until page 15, and then again in page 32. He doesn't even arrive in the country. So I really kind of want to thin that down a little bit. So let's just have some fun. Let's go to... This is kind of like my note sheet or whatever. So let's just kind of start an outline. I kind of like to outline my books. So the Trevor Knight series, Autumn and Destiny book 4 had like 100 chapters. Arabian Dawn book 5 had, I think, about 80 chapters. I think I want Babylon Dithers to be closer toward Arabian Dawn's size. So let's just imagine 80 chapters or so for the book, 4 acts. So that's like 20 chapters in the book. So let's just begin making a list. Prologue, Act 1. Okay, and then Act 2, and then we go 21, 22, 3. Act 4. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to go anywhere near completing this. But, okay, so originally what I have written here is chapter 1. So this shows an Islamic State fighter. You know, I'm thinking I could actually move this into the prologue. So we'll just say prologue scene here. So here we could have scene, I don't know, I'll just type in here, scene with Islamic State fighters. So that'll kind of set up, you know, the bad guys, and also they're moving on Mosul. So Act 1 could begin with the fall of Mosul. Is that good or not? I mean, what if... Should I actually have the fall of Mosul be the prologue? I could actually switch it around where, like, the scene with the Islamic State fighters, could that actually be part of Act 1, and the fall of Mosul will actually be the prologue? That's something worth considering. Because if Act 1 is kind of... let's see here. No, I don't know. Maybe this scene could stay. So Act 1 could be the Iraqi general. We could meet him. Then it could also go from there to the Turkish consulate is attacked. And I suppose maybe from there we could have this scene with Bayadi chooses to hire the satire force. Is that the full chapter? I guess. Then we'll probably definitely need a scene with Samuel Creed. That could be, you know, let's actually make that. Should we make that Samuel Creed scene? But then I don't know, because then again, that keeps pushing Trevor to the back. Because as it is right now, Trevor has his first scene in chapter 2. And already I'm starting to push Trevor beyond chapter 2. And the reason why I say this is a problem is because this is supposed to be a Trevor Knight book. So I don't like if Trevor's not even introduced until like late into chapter 2 or chapter 3 or chapter 4, because I mean, if I still have him in Saudi Arabia, he's not even going to arrive in Iraq until like chapter 6, 7 or so. And I don't like that. So I guess that would have to go, Samuel Creed scene would have to go into chapter 1. But then this is a massive chapter for chapter 1. The Iraqi general, Turkish consulate is attacked. Bayati hires a satire force. Samuel Creed scene. Something I am kind of considering is I could like have the entire bit of Act 1 be like this whole storyline about this the fall of Mosul and this Iraqi general and this Turkish consulate. So I mean, like, this could be chapter 1, the Turkish consulate could be chapter 2, Bayati hiring the satire force could be chapter 3, Samuel Creed chapter 4, so on and so forth. So like the whole Act 1 could be the fall of Mosul and, you know, the fate of this, you know, Turkish consulate and the satire team and all that. And Trevor Knight, you know, he may appear in like, you know, chapter 5, whatever, chapter 10, whatever. And then maybe he actually arrives in Iraq at the end of the act. And so then Act 2 would show Trevor like going to try to help that special forces team, the satire team. And that way I could at least have all this stuff fleshed out. But the downside of that is you wouldn't really meet Trevor except for like 1 or 2 chapters in all of Act 1. So Trevor wouldn't really even begin in earnest until Act 2 of the book. And I don't like that. Trevor not even appearing really until Act 2. And this is kind of a problem, I think, with Atlantis Dislodged. And is I'm already kind of considering that maybe you won't even meet Trevor until Act 2 of Atlantis Dislodged. I don't know. And I kind of am okay with that because Atlantis Dislodged is going to be a massive book. So I think it's okay if Trevor doesn't really appear for a while. I think for that book, Act 1 may kind of be like the search for Trevor. But I don't really like beginning Babylon Dithers with Act 1 as just waiting for Trevor to show up. I don't know. I don't want to throw all this stuff into the prologue. I mean, that's just too much stuff. But at the same time, I don't really want to have Trevor not even appear in Act 1. I could try to space it out a little bit more where, like, you know, maybe I'll have the Iraqi general scene. Then I could have Trevor in Saudi Arabia. Then the next chapter could be Turkish consulate. So it could go something like, I don't know, let's just say for shits and giggles. So then we could have the Iraqi general in chapter 1. Chapter 2 could be the Iraqi vice president goes to Saudi Arabia. We meet Trevor. Chapter 3, the Turkish consulate is attacked. Chapter 4, I could have like more of the Iraqi general like escaping Mosul, but I don't really like that because, again, that's just kind of shoveling Trevor down the list, you know, and I would like to keep Trevor in the story because it's the Trevor Knight series. So let's just say we keep it for now. Let's move Bayati that to chapter 4. But again, this is like not making any changes for what I already have, where this is kind of already what I have. Chapter 2, this is where Trevor appears, and yep, we meet Trevor. So I mean, that's pretty much the way it is right now. So I'm not really changing anything from what I already have. Okay, how about this? What if the scene with the Islamic State fighters is in the prologue. Maybe I could have like 2 prologue chapters. So 1, the scene with them, and then 2, like the second prologue chapter could be the Iraqi general. And then we could also throw in here, where did the Turkish consulate is attacked? We could move that there. But anyway, so the prologue, first scene is with the Islamic State fighters. Second scene or second chapter of the prologue is the Iraqi general. That's kind of like the fall of Mosul. And then the Turkish consulate is attacked. Then what do we begin with next? I don't really remember how this happens in the book. What I already wrote, like the chronology of it. But let's see here. I'm trying to think which scene here should come first. Let's see, is there any hint here what happens? I don't know. I'm trying to think what would be better chapter 1. Beati hires satire force. Iraqi president goes. We meet Trevor. It makes more sense logically to follow up this scene with Beati with Samuel Creed's scene. And also some time needs to pass between Trevor's scene and him going to Iraq. So let's put this, Iraqi vice president goes to Saudi Arabia. We meet Trevor. So that happens in chapter 1. Chapter 1, we meet Trevor. I like that. Chapter 2, Beati chooses to hire a satire force. Maybe potentially Samuel Creed's scene could go into chapter 2, or I could slide it into chapter 3. I don't know. Let's just, since I think I kind of like smaller chapters, let's just say Beati chooses to hire a satire force, Samuel Creed scene. And then I imagine the next scene would be the SAT team arrives in Iraq. They have their mission. Their helicopter gets shot down. I think one thing we can do is actually kind of begin to reverse engineer the books, which I kind of like to do sometimes. So Act 1 would end with the SAT force or satire force, whatever. SAT force is rescued in Mosul. And then the final chapter would kind of be concluding everything. So I'll just say like, I don't know, just for now, I'll just write conclusions, where I'll just kind of wrap up all the storylines and, kind of bleed into Act 2 or whatever. So now we just kind of need to fill in these remaining chapters for Act 1. Let's see here. I don't know exactly which scene would follow the satire team arrives in Iraq. They have their mission. Their helicopter gets shot down. I don't want to go back to the Iraqi vice president. That was just kind of a one-off character. I don't have anything to do with Trevor right now. I don't have anything to do with Beati or Samuel Creed. I don't really want to follow up with another chapter of the SAT team. I could go with the Islamic State fighters scene. I could go with the Iraqi general scene. No, you know what? Actually, this is a pretty big event, and some time has passed since we last met Trevor. And again, the whole point is this is a Trevor Knight book, so I want to get back to Trevor as soon as possible. And this is a good kind of climax or whatever. The helicopter gets shot down, bum, bum, bum. So I think now we could actually switch gears and have Trevor arrives in Iraq. He meets his father, who is in Iraq. Basically, his father, Stephen Knight, who is a U.S. Senator, he is having a meeting with the Iraqi Prime Minister, which I won't really go into too much. So Trevor arrives in Iraq. He meets his father, and from there, I think he immediately goes to meet with Iranians because he hears that the satire team is shot down in Mosul, and basically they're hunkered down or whatever in this oil refinery. I don't know if I need to actually show them like fighting their way there. For now, I'll just kind of assume I don't really need that scene. I could just have you find out through dialogue that Trevor's dad says, oh yeah, this team is holed up in a refinery, you know. I could write a scene about that, but for now, you know, I just don't really want to plan that in because, again, you know, it just stretched this out too much. And I kind of want to keep as much as I can just to the essentials, you know. So Trevor arrives in Iraq. He meets his father. He hears about the satire team that's in trouble. So he goes to meet with the Iranians to see if they could help. So here you could meet the Iranian general, and he has a meeting with Trevor. And so basically they kind of discuss, you know, what each of them want in Iraq. You know, the Iranians very curious. Basically, Trevor shows up on this Iranian military base in Baghdad, you know, asking like, hey, can you guys help with this, you know, help rescue my friends? And, you know, Trevor and the Iranians kind of have some history together. But this just shows kind of Trevor's personality. He's just like, well, I don't care. I'll go see if the Iranians can help. Trevor really doesn't mind at this point. Like, Trevor will talk to anyone because, I mean, Trevor has met with, like, the president of Egypt, who was known as kind of a corrupt dictator. He's met with the Syrian president, who was a dictator involved in this war. He, you know, got real close with the Saudi royal family. So at this point, Trevor's like, you know, he'll meet with anyone. If they can have like common ground on something, if they could be allies temporarily, Trevor is absolutely willing to do that. You know, he's willing to just bury the hatchet, any kind of problems he has with Iran, you know, whatever. I mean, that's in the past. He doesn't really care. They could be friends short term. So Trevor, that's kind of why he goes to this base. So he meets with the Iranians. Basically, they give Trevor a mission. They want him to contact the Kurds, and that's also something Trevor wants to do, is he wants to meet with the Kurds. So then the next thing would be Trevor has to go to run these like military equipment, whatever, to the Kurds. I'm not sure which town though. Badukaba. I know that the Iraqis are going to hold out at this town, Samara. That's where they're going to kind of have their last stand because ISIS is moving down from Mosul, and that's where they're closing in on is Samara. So they're closing in on Baghdad. So basically, the Iraqis are trying to get all the help they can because they need to hold Samara. Otherwise, ISIS is going to begin besieging Baghdad. And if Baghdad falls, probably the whole country falls to ISIS. So the idea is Trevor is sent here kind of to the east or whatever to make contact with the Kurds, because the Iranians also, like, they're okay with the Kurds sending aid to, you know, Samara to save Baghdad, because the Iranians do not want Baghdad and Iraq to fall to ISIS, because basically, I haven't touched on this yet, the prime minister of Iraq is Shia Muslim, which is what Iran is. Most of the Middle East is Sunni Islam. And the way I remember that is the Middle East is sunny. It's real sunny. It's real hot. So that's how I remember the denomination. Most of the Middle East is Sunni Islam. The Middle East is sunny. Iran is Shia. So the prime minister of Iraq is a Shia Muslim. Or I don't know, maybe it's called Shiite Muslim. I don't know. I never know pronunciation. But anyway, so the Iranians actually like the Iraqi prime minister. They want to keep him in power because he's kind of like aligned with Iran. They get along, the Iraqi prime minister and Iran. And ISIS is like fanatical Sunni Islam. And they've been fighting in Syria here. And Syria is an ally with Iran, and Syria is also kind of largely, thank you, baby. Syria is largely Shia Muslim as well. What are you saying, baby? So anyway, thank you, baby. So anyway, Nibbler. So that's why the Iranians and Iraqis kind of get along. So thank you, baby. So, the Iranians definitely do not like ISIS. So that's why the Iranians are willing to help. So they send Trevor to... Gosh, this is so hard with Nibbler talking. So anyway, that's why Trevor goes to help the Kurds, and the Iranians are okay with that. The Iranians want Iraq to remain. They don't want Iraq to fall to ISIS. So, would the next chapter be Trevor? No, because I think that's a little abrupt. So I think we need to check in with the satire force. See what's going on with them. See how they're holding out and all that. I don't know if I need a whole chapter for that, but maybe for now we'll keep it. Okay, so from there, then I think we show Trevor going on a weapons delivery. I do not know to where. So then he basically comes across this town. Again, I'm not sure where. And kind of my idea was that the town is being attacked by ISIS. And some ISIS fighters are holed up in some kind of a building, and they have like several captives. They've taken like the wives and stuff of several villagers. And so Trevor shows up, and something I kind of want to do is he basically drives into the town, and these Kurds who are kind of like keeping watch like at the outskirts of town are like, how the heck did you make it past the minefield? And Trevor's just like, minefield? Because apparently, they set like a bunch of mines or whatever because they're trying to block ISIS from attacking. And Trevor just unwittingly just drove straight through a minefield and didn't know. And so anyway, I thought that'd just be kind of a humorous thing. So anyway, part of my idea is, so ISIS is holed up. And so Trevor is like, well, I don't know if these are actually going to be Kurds that he meets. Again, I don't know which town it's going to be. But, that's his destination, is he's looking for the Kurds. And so he finds out that there's ISIS holed up in this town. And so what he kind of does is he rallies the town to kind of be like, okay, well, I brought weapons, so if you guys are willing, let's go take out those ISIS fighters and, save your wives and stuff. And so what they do is they go to launch, an attack on the ISIS fighters. And so they're going through this building where ISIS is. And I want to have this scene where there's like a hallway where like the guy next to Trevor gets shot, and Trevor kind of has kind of like a panic attack or whatever from that, where Trevor like sees death closing in on him. Like he sees that death is at the end of the hall. If he continues down that hall, he fears he is going to die. And to this point, Trevor has not really too much been afraid of death. If anything, he's kind of been seeking it out in a way. But I like this idea where he's going down this hallway, attacking these ISIS fighters, and he basically sees his death. He's like, oh my gosh, I am going to die if I continue down this hall. So he kind of like freaks out, and basically he kind of chickens out, where he doesn't want to go down that hall. He knows if he goes down that hall, he's going to die, and he's not ready for that. So it's kind of like the first time in the series where we really see he has a fear of death. And I also like it kind of just for part of his character growth, because he is going to become, a really kind of famous fighter against ISIS, So, I mean, he's going to kind of conquer this fear, but for now, he's going to kind of panic and, he's going to fear death. So I don't know if this is all going to be one chapter, but I guess for now we could just keep it that. So Trevor goes on a weapons delivery, and then I don't know how to word this exactly. Trevor rallies the locals and launches an attack. What happened? An attack against the ISIS fighters who are holed out in a building. Trevor fears death and chickens out. And then I guess the villagers rescue their wives, and then have some kind of scene with Trevor, having some kind of conclusion with that village guy. Now, how does this really affect him? Because I don't think those villagers are going to join like the defense of Samara. I think they're more just like local villagers. They're not like, the Kurdish, fighters. So, I mean, they're more just villagers. Maybe he just gets a tip that, where the Kurds are. I kind of want to say they might be up into Crete. Even though, Samara's the main one here. I mean, maybe ISIS is like advancing onto Crete. So maybe that's where Trevor is heading toward. I could also have him go up to Kirk, but I don't know if I want him to go that far. But then again, that's kind of where the Kurds are, I think. Anyway, I don't think it really matters. So maybe like he's into Crete or whatever. Maybe that's where like he has that fight against ISIS. And then he continues on to Kirk. Erbil or whatever. Erbil. I never know pronunciation. That's like, I think that's kind of like the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. So anyway, maybe he gets like a tip that, maybe Kirk is his destination or whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So maybe after that scene, that's just what Trevor's going to do. He's going to continue on toward that other city. Okay, so I've been trying to think of what happens next. So I've been reading up on the Islamic State invasion of Iraq, which happened in June 2014. That's like, the fall of Mosul and everything was around that time. So one of the things I saw is that there was a base, COB Spreckner, and in 2014, during, the ISIS, this base was captured and 1,700 people were killed in mass shooting executions. That was in Tikrit. And this is about the same time, like mid-June. So, I mean, this, like, chronologically all fits that, Trevor would be about in Tikrit at that time. So I'm thinking that is where Trevor goes, where he encounters some villagers who, he kind of rallies them to, save their wives and stuff, and, has the hallway scene and all that. So I think that is like, the forward elements of ISIS have arrived into Crete, and Trevor arrives into Crete as well. And so he kind of rallies the local forces there, and, they save their wives and all that. But then I think what will happen next is I'll show a scene with like the ISIS leaders or whatever, the ISIS generals or whatever. I actually have that scene with them in chapter 1. So like Bilal Hassan al-Malaki, he's one of the ISIS fighters or whatever. I don't know exactly, like, I don't have a story arc for him yet, but I know, he could be a major antagonist for the book. He's an ISIS fighter, a leader. And I earlier showed him, like in the prologue or whatever, his kind of moving on Mosul. So now that guy could be moving on to Crete, and he could be the one who has that massacre, this real life massacre at this base into Crete. So that could be like immediately following the scene with Trevor, rallying the villagers or whatever. So that ISIS leader arrives into Crete and has that massacre at that base. So I think what I want to do is I would have ISIS general arrives into Crete and orders the Camp Shalom massacre. And then just because, maybe I'll just copy that and then go like this and go like that and go like that. 12-point Garamond. And then from there, whoa, what is happening? Trevor leaves for Kirk. And let's see how to spell that. Kirk. So what happens from there, I don't think I need that page anymore. So Trevor heads up toward Kirk, and I already looked it up, and it's about an hour and a half drive, which is pretty good, because just looking at the distance here on the map, I was like, oh no, that looks like, a full day trip or whatever. But no, that's only about an hour and a half drive or whatever. So what I was thinking was, since I haven't had any scenes with him since the right here, the Iraqi general, the one who will wind up becoming the one in Act 4 who leads the attack on the Kurds. So I haven't had anything with him since. So I think it's about time I reintroduce that character. So my idea is, what happened is that guy, he was in Mosul, and originally he had like a whole army with him, but just over the next several days, his army is just whittled down and whittled down. So like in the beginning, he may have, a few thousand people under him. But by this point, which is about not quite a week later, maybe, he has kind of been fighting a battle like all the way down, trying to escape from ISIS. And now he is only left with like 8 people left alive. and he's kind of, somewhere around here. So what I was thinking was Trevor will actually stumble upon that general and his remaining forces, like they're trying to escape to friendly territory. And so Trevor bumps into him on the way to Kirk to meet with the Kurds to deliver those weapons. So, for the next chapter, that we could meet the Iraqi general. How would I say this? Iraqi general is down to about 8 men, and Trevor stumbles upon them. And then, just to have like some spice up some action, so I think then the ISIS fighters will catch up to them, and so they'll kind of have a fight scene, a battle. ISIS catches up to them and a battle ensues. So it's just like Trevor and the Iraqi general and like the 8, allies he has left, the 8 soldiers he has left under his command against ISIS. The ISIS fighters have showed up. Maybe it will be a different leader, because in this scene here, in this chapter, I have this one guy, Bilam al-Malaki, and then there's another fighter somewhere in this scene. I think there's kind of like 2 generals, ISIS generals I've introduced. So like the one of them could be moving down toward Tikrit, and he could be the one who does the massacre. And the other general guy, the other ISIS fighter, could be pursuing this Iraqi general. So so I think that's how I will have it. So there'll be basically the 2 ISIS generals, whatever. ISIS catches up to them and a battle ensues. So I think we can meet one of the other ISIS generals introduced in the prologue. And then at the end, I think I'll just say they, because I'll just say Trevor and co are rescued by Kurdish special forces. So I think Trevor, he's on his way to Kirk, and then I think the Kurdish special forces general guy, let's see, I have him somewhere right up here. This guy, Firat Malazada, the leader of the Kurdish special forces. I think he will show up at this point. So, he shows up from somewhere, from Kurdish territory. And so he shows up basically with his army and defeats the ISIS fighters. So I don't think I'll have that like ISIS general guy get killed off yet. I think I'd probably like to leave him alive for a while longer. But yeah, so that guy arrives. Trevor and co are rescued by Kurdish special forces. I'll just put in the general's name. Firat Malazada. Rescued by Kurdish French by Firat Malazada. I wonder if I should introduce him then. Should I have him appear earlier so he doesn't just show up out of the blue? I'm kind of leaning toward not introducing him beforehand. Yeah, because I think that way, it'll just be like, everyone is meeting this guy for the first time. And this is like the first like genuine Kurd that Trevor meets in Iraq. So it's actually going to be someone he'll wind up liking a lot, because this guy is a fighter. He does like taking on ISIS. He's not going to run away from them. And so when Trevor meets him, he's going to think like, oh yeah, this guy seems just like the Kurds I met in Syria. This guy's a fighter. He's willing to take on ISIS and all that. So then I was thinking it would be a little bit easy if that guy is just like, oh yeah, sure, I'll help, they want the Kurds to help out with the defense of Baghdad, because ISIS is marching down. They've pretty much taken Tikrit, so now they're going to be moving down towards Samarra, and that's like the last line of defense before Baghdad. So the Iraqis and also the Iranians, they want to get all the reinforcements they can to Samarra. So basically the plan is to have the Kurds attack Tikrit, because that way if they are threatening ISIS's rear, they won't be able to move down into Baghdad. So they basically want to put as much pressure on Tikrit as possible so that ISIS cannot continue their march south. So even though Samarra is the last line of defense, really Tikrit is the front lines, and that's where the front lines are now. So I think when Trevor meets this Kurdish special forces guy, I think he won't really have much resistance to joining in the attack on Tikrit. I think at this point, ISIS's focus is on marching south and taking Baghdad. They're not so concerned right now about attacking Erbil and Kirkuk and all that. Their gaze is to the south. So I think because of it, the Kurds can kind of risk kind of going on the offensive. So it's not like the Kurds are going to say, oh no, we need to protect our own people, I think at this point, the Kurds are more willing to say, hey, we'll help out. We'll come to the rescue, we'll join in on the defense of Samarra, the defense of Baghdad. We'll launch an attack against Tikrit. So I think this guy, Firat Malazada, will pretty much say, he won't give Trevor trouble. He'll understand this is cool. This is important. So does that happen immediately in this chapter, or should I have another chapter in between? I suppose I should have another chapter checking in on what's going on in Mosul because of the action at the refinery. So let's do another scene. Another scene in Mosul showing Satire defending the oil refinery. So yeah, now they're really, pinned down. They do not have very much control left. They are vastly outnumbered and they are surrounded. They are cut off. So they are in big trouble. I don't think I will need a full chapter for that necessarily, but for now we'll just say that's a whole chapter. And then so for chapter 12 then will be Firat agrees to attack Tikrit to take pressure off of Baghdad. And then from there, since Trevor is with the Iraqi general, I think from there, so he meets with Firat Malazada somewhere around here. I don't think Trevor will actually continue to make contact with the Kurds. I think Firat will pretty much handle that himself. He'll say, I'll gather my army and I'll join in on the attack on Tikrit or whatever. Meanwhile, I think Trevor will take the Iraqi general back down south because, he needs to rejoin his army and he needs to join in on the attack on Tikrit or the defense of Samarra. He needs to get back to his front lines. So Trevor will take that Iraqi general back southward. So I don't know what may happen next after that. I could do a lot of things. I could have like a chapter down in Samara, like showing Nibbler. I could have some chapter setting up like what's going on with the Iraqis. I just had the scene with the oil refinery, so I don't think I need to show them again. I could show something with Stephen Knight, Trevor's dad, because he's doing all this sort of stuff, meeting with the Iraqi prime minister and all that. So I think for now I will just do Stephen Knight scene. Oh, gosh, that's the second time I misspelled that. Stephen Knight scene. I'll just kind of leave that way for now. And then the next chapter would be Trevor takes the Iraqi general south to rejoin his army, I guess, for the defense of Baghdad / Tikrit offensive. Because, yeah, so they're really trying to put pressure on Tikrit. And I do not at all have any kind of clue what they may say. But since there's going to be like an hour and a half drive, instead of just skipping over that, I wonder like what could they talk about on their drive. So I would just have here like a scene with Trevor and the general on the road to Tikrit. What do they talk about? Because I don't know. Because I mean, I think this would be a good like scene where maybe we could get more about Trevor's, backstory, or I don't know. I don't really think that, because I kind of want to assume a little bit the readers are pretty familiar with Trevor. So I don't really want to have like a get to know you chapter or whatever. And, this is already chapter 14. So I don't think I should have a scene right here in the middle of the book or the middle of the act, like, learning about Trevor. But maybe there are things we can learn about him. Like maybe, the general's going to talk about his family, and then he'll ask Trevor, like, what brought you here, and ask him like about his family and all that. Ask him why he fights. Ask him why he's there. And so I don't know, just a little good time where we could kind of, learn more about Trevor, learn more about what he's doing here, what he's thinking, things that have not been introduced yet in the book. So yeah, I don't know. I think that could just be a real good scene though. And it's kind of like a calm before the storm, because you can see we're already getting toward, chapter 20 or whatever, because figuring about 20 chapters or so per act. So, I mean, this is like the calm before the storm, and it's about an hour and a half drive they have. So I think it's a good time to have kind of a talky scene where, just kind of feeling each other out. And even though this Iraqi general is not really an important character, it's probably the only time Trevor is going to meet him in the book. So it's just a good scene to kind of have someone talk with Trevor and, yeah. Again, I don't have a clue really what they will talk about, but I think this could be a really good scene, I think scenes like this are good because it's just a way you could learn things about characters that you wouldn't learn any other way. Because, I mean, like when Trevor meets with his dad, like in Baghdad, they're not really going to talk about Trevor's past too much, So this car ride with this Iraqi general is a good scene where that could happen. Now, we're really kind of closing in on it here. So something that's kind of weird is that all the focus kind of has been about like, defending Baghdad and the last line of defense of Samara and, attacking Tikrit and all that. And Trevor, I think, would not be joining in on the battle because Trevor, especially at this point, he's not quite a soldier like that. And also, we had the scene with him in the hallway where, Trevor is really rethinking right now whether he wants to be a soldier like that, whether he really wants to take on ISIS himself, whether he kind of has a death wish or not. And that may be something that he talks about with the Iraqi general, is that, maybe Trevor really intended, like joining with the Kurds and stuff. Maybe he kind of realizes that was a mistake. He doesn't want to be a fighter. Maybe he wants to just be a humanitarian, He wants to deliver medical aid and stuff, and he wants to give medical aid. And he wants to get people away to safety and all that, So Trevor may kind of realize his calling is not as a warrior, even though he will kind of, wind up being a bit of a warrior in the book, and especially the next book when he's really quite famous for fighting against ISIS. But at this point, I think Trevor is kind of rethinking his purpose and just kind of like, I think I just want to deal with like humanitarian aid stuff. So I think, so Trevor's not going to plan to take part in the attacks down here. And again, Trevor's purpose is to save his friends at the refinery up in Mosul. So I think that's going to be Trevor's thinking. He's not going to want to join this battle. So because of it, I think I don't really want to show this battle in depth or in detail. So let's see. I don't really want to have like a long chapter with the Iraqi general and, his fighting around Tikrit, because he's not the focus of the story, it's the Trevor Knight series. So I really want to show Trevor. So, I guess the next scene would be, I might have another scene in between these, like maybe just another Mosul scene with satire, just showing they're still holding out, they're still around. And then in the same chapter, because that'll just be a brief scene, then I think we'll have Trevor and Co arrives in Tikrit. And then I think Trevor may have a scene potentially with the Iranians. Because maybe Trevor is like, okay, I held up my end of the bargain. I met with the Kurds. They're going to be on their way. They're going to help out. And so I think Trevor will maybe meet with the Iranian general and be like, okay, send help to Mosul, because I think the Iranians have like 10 divisions of, military forces on the border here. So I think what they may be doing is I think they may send like, 8 or 9 divisions to Tikrit to take part in the battle. Or I don't even know if they'll send that many. But then I think they'll send maybe 1 division or whatever to Mosul to help in the liberation of that refinery. And again, I don't know if I explained why they would do this. Basically, what Trevor convinces them of is that the whole point with a refinery is satire got involved because Turks were taken captive by ISIS. And so Satire Force shows up to save those Turkish diplomatic officials, and then they kind of get pinned down at the oil refinery. And so what Trevor does is he contacts the Iranians to say like, hey, can you help these guys out? This American crew, this special forces counterterrorism group. And Iran was kind of like, we don't care about them. We're fine. Let them die. But Trevor's also like, well, there's also these Turkish diplomatic officials, and Turkey and Iran do not really get along, but they're kind of like lukewarm. So, they've had their problems in the past, But right now, they're kind of like, maybe we can get along a little bit. Maybe there's little rooms, where we can get along, little issues we can agree on. And since ISIS has a Turkish diplomatic people held captive, right now Turkey is not too happy with ISIS, even though like historically they have kind of been partners because, again, I don't want to go into it too much in depth. But when ISIS was sweeping across Syria and attacking the Kurds, Turkey was okay with it because Turkey does not like the Kurds. So in that instance, they were kind of friends with ISIS. But now that ISIS is, taking over northern Iraq and took this Turkish diplomatic consulate staff hostage, Turkey's like, hey, we want our people back. So that's why they hire satire. So Trevor tells the Iranians, like, hey, you could get on Turkey's good side if you help liberate their diplomats. If you rescue them, Turkey is going to be grateful to you. So that's kind of how he talks them into that. And again, Iran is not, they do not like ISIS whatsoever because ISIS is radical Sunni Islam, and Iran is the opposite. So right now, both Turkey and Iran do not like ISIS. So that's how these two sides kind of become friends for now, Turkey and Iran. So they kind of have mutual interest in saving that crew, that Turkish people. So it's not the American crew that the Iranians want to save. It's more the Turks, So I think Trevor meets with that Iranian general in Tikrit or whatever. Or maybe they're outside Tikrit. Maybe they're in Samarra. I don't know. But yeah, so I think Trevor and co arrives in Tikrit. Trevor meets with Iranian general and asks him to fulfill his end of the bargain and dispatch forces to rescue the trapped satire team in Mosul. And then again, since I don't really want to show, a battle for Tikrit, that's not the focus of the story, then I guess the next scene would be showing the Iranian rescue team moves to Mosul. So I don't know exactly what I'll have here. Like maybe I'll have, you'll get to meet some Iraqi or Iranian special forces. Maybe you'll meet like another Iranian general. I don't know, because again, this is all going to be important because in the next book, Iran is going to invade Israel. So like any character I introduce now is probably almost definitely going to appear in the next book, Atlantis Dislodged. So, this would be a good opportunity to meet another Iranian general or whoever goes to rescue this team. So I don't know exactly what I'll do here. But yeah, so Iranian rescue team moves to Mosul. And then I guess I'll just say I'll probably do another scene with the SAT forces fighting desperately in maybe potentially they even lose. So maybe they are defeated. And then the Iranians arrive. Anyway, I think that is pretty much bridges the difference here. So I think we can delete those. And yeah, because I'll probably also wind up creating another chapter or so, just like, spontaneous, whatever. something will just come to mind like, oh, I could have a chapter about this. Because that's something I do when I outline, is if I think of something on the spot, like whatever, just some kind of other scene with whoever, I mean, like one person I haven't mentioned at all, I think, in this is the Iraqi prime minister, because he's actually a fairly major character, and I haven't had him at all in this outline yet. So I may have scenes with him. I may have more scenes with whoever, I don't know, but that's one who comes to mind. So even though I have 18 chapters here, I imagine it'll probably be expanded to 20 or so, which puts it on pace for a 20 chapter act. So yeah, that seems like Act 1 is pretty solid. So yeah, I think basically the gist of it is there's the fall of Mosul, and then ISIS is marching down. Trevor arrives in Iraq. He learns that the American team is trapped in Mosul, so he contacts the Iranians, and they want him to run some weapons to the Kurds, and for the Kurds to show up in the defense of Samarra and Tikrit and Baghdad and all that. So Trevor works his way up to Tikrit. He has the scene in the hallway where he sees death, and he kind of chickens out a bit, where he's like, I do not want to go down that hall. I am not ready to die for this. And then he, works his way up. He runs into the Iraqi general. Then he runs into the Kurdish Special Forces commander, the Malazada guy, Firat or whatever his name is. He's, Trevor's going to like him. Then he takes the Iraqi general back down to Tikrit to rejoin, his army for, the fighting down here. And then Trevor, says to the Iranians, like, okay, send a team to Mosul to rescue that team. And they do, and that team is rescued. And then, just have some conclusions where I kind of wrap up the storylines. So that'll probably be the last chapter that the satire team makes an appearance. I do not really plan on using them again. So I think that'll just be it for them. I mean, I could have it be where like Trevor gets in a jam later in the book and maybe they arrive, but I don't really like that too much because that just seems like a Deus Ex Machina or whatever. Wherever Trevor like runs into difficulty, then the satire team just shows up to, repay him, whatever. Why I actually like this is because the satire force has actually helped Trevor out once or twice already. So the whole point here is that Trevor is kind of getting, not revenge. What's the opposite of revenge? He's paying it back. He's paying them back for rescuing him a time or two. So now he's saving them instead. So it's just kind of, he's paying his debts, And they're probably going to wind up saving him at some point, in the future, maybe several times. But for this book, he actually helps them. And then I think they are pretty much done with the stories. So I think the storyline or whatever with the satire force is pretty much contained just to this one act. And also, since it's, really the focus of the act, I think it makes sense that really that's their only appearance really in the book. I don't really want readers to remember, the satire team and like, in Act 3 or Act 4 have them show up again, I think that'd just be kind of corny a little bit. So I think they're pretty much done with the book. So then we move on to Act 2, which I don't really want to go into right now because this video has been going on for long enough. I think right now it's already close to like an hour and a half, maybe even a 2-hour video. And that's just way too long. I know no one's going to be listening at this point. So I don't want to like even begin to like map out all of Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. So I think I've shown you guys a pretty good bit of brainstorming for this act. I like it pretty well. Again, my main concern was trying to have Trevor invested throughout the act, where it's not like Trevor just shows up in chapter 5 and then chapter 8 and then he doesn't show up again till chapter 12, and then he just has one more scene or two. He's in almost every other scene. Maybe not quite that much, but here chapter 1 he's in there, chapter 5 he's in there. Check in with that. The meeting with Trevor, so he's in chapter 6. He's in chapter 8. Trevor leaves for Kirk, so he's in chapter 9. He's in chapter 10. Another scene with Moses showing Scepter. That's just a real short chapter 11. Firat agrees. So yeah, he's in chapter 12. I don't know if, I'm going to have Trevor at all in that scene, but it's his dad, so it's at least related, And then he's in chapter 14. He's in chapter 15. Even though Trevor may not be involved in that, the rescue of the team in Mosul, it's because of Trevor that happens. This is what Trevor's been pushing for. And again, since Trevor, the hallway scene, he probably won't want to join in on this rescue operation. He is not a soldier. So I think, it's okay if Trevor is not involved in that scene. Maybe he's not even in the area, Trevor may still be down here around Tikrit or whatever. And, Mosul's way up there, and there's probably ISIS is all over this area. So Trevor's probably not even, close to that. Yeah, so I don't even know, where Trevor meets with any of those team or whatever. If, maybe they go down to Baghdad or whatever, so maybe they're flying out of the country or whatever, and maybe Trevor can meet with them or whatever. Or maybe Samuel Creed will contact Trevor. So again, I'll be able to have a scene with Samuel Creed again, where maybe he'll, call Trevor up and thank him for rescuing his team or whatever. And that could go under the conclusions or whatever. Because Trevor could be down in Tikrit or whatever. He's not in Mosul. And so, yeah, Trevor is in almost every chapter, or at least every other chapter. So that was my main concern for Act 1, was making sure that it shows why it's the Trevor Knight book. And indeed, now with him in almost every chapter, it seems like that makes sense. It's not where... I mentioned earlier where I was considering maybe Trevor doesn't even appear really in Act 1. I did not like that because, again, it's supposed to be the Trevor Knight book, and if he doesn't even show up till page 150 or whatever. And so at least this way, Trevor has been having a main role in everything here. This Iranian general, he's just a minor character, kind of. The Iraqi vice president, minor character. Bayati, that's a minor scene. All these scenes are pretty minor. They're kind of side character stuff. But Trevor, we see a lot with him, with the hallway scene and everything, major scene that shows his character development that will be a major impact for this book, where he's kind of really thinking at this point, he is not a soldier. And that really remains consistent for this whole act, where Trevor is not a soldier. So, except for the scene where they have the scene with the fight scene or whatever, where they're attacked by ISIS and rescued by Firat. Trevor may, defend himself there because, ISIS is attacking. So Trevor has no problem, defending his life. He's under attack. He'll do that. But what he's really leery about is going on the offensive, actually joining battle. Right now Trevor's really second guessing that. But in this scene, Trevor may indeed, fight. So it's not like he's committed to nonviolence or whatever. He has no problem fighting to save his life and to save his friends and all that. But yeah, he doesn't want to go on the offensive. He's not quite ready to just, be a warrior and die in battle. That's not his aspiration at this point. And I really like it too, because actually when we first meet him and when he shows up in Baghdad and meets with the Iranians, at that point, Trevor is actually really kind of almost suicidal. He's really kind of beaten down in life. So it's kind of like if the Iranians kill him, he's kind of just well, so be it, He's not really so concerned about death when he shows up in Iraq. And that's kind of why he goes to Iraq, is because he's thinking he wants to join in on the defense against ISIS. And so when he shows up in Iraq, he kind of does have a death wish. But then when he gets to that hallway scene in Tikrit or whatever, that's where he really thinks I am not ready to die and I am not ready to be a warrior. So that's really kind of the arc of Act 1. He shows up in Iraq and he's really kind of has a death wish. He has the hallway scene where he's no, I don't want to die. I don't want to be a warrior. And yeah, so he doesn't really. He's just trying to gather some friends to rescue his friends, And then this will lead into Act 2, where there's these Christians and stuff who are trapped in the mountains, and ISIS is kind of moving north now because their push south has been defeated. So they're kind of moving north and stuff to attack those undefended people. And so what Trevor does is he begins running humanitarian aid to those people. And then there'll be the scene, I think, with the Mosul Dam. And I think that's where Trevor will have another bit of character development where, maybe he will kind of decide more to be a fighter. Because what's happening is, ISIS is attacking all these undefended people 50,000 or 40,000 civilians. And so Trevor is at this point, he's having a lot of problems with the Kurds because the Kurds do not want to die defending these Christians and stuff, because they're just they're fleeing away from ISIS, even though the Kurds help here in Act 1. That is because of that one guy, Firat Mirzadeh or whatever. He is a fighter. So Trevor kind of thinks, all the Kurds are fighters. But here in Act 2, he discovers that the Kurds are all running away. They're all just concerned about themselves. And they don't care about all these civilians. So when Trevor goes here in Act 2, I don't know exactly where. I have it written somewhere here in the book. It's they attack the town. They approach the Sinjar Mountains. So let's see if I can find where that is. Sinjar Mountains. So yeah, it's way up there. So let's see. Sinjar Mountains. Actually, it looks like it's south of that lake. Is it down here somewhere? I do not know. Oh, and also, I mentioned that city Tal Afar. Did I mention somewhere here? Zumar. I thought somewhere here I mentioned something about that city, so I don't know. There may be some stuff going on around the city, so maybe ISIS is kind of pushing westward, and then they're going toward those mountains or whatever, wherever they are. So yeah, that's apparently where it is. That's like close to the border. Oh, right there, Sinjar. So yeah, that's kind of Act 2 is ISIS is moving over here, and the Kurds, who are mostly like all in this area, they're like, screw that, we're leaving. And so what happens is Trevor is like, he's kind of like the only one who wants to help these people because there's like 40,000 unarmed people against ISIS. And the Kurds are just like, oh, well, no, we're out of here. And so, anyway, that's going to be in Act 2. And I think Trevor will kind of change there where he kind of decides, like, hey, if no one else is going to fight them, then I will. And again, there's probably going to be some climactic scene or whatever with the Mosul Dam. Because I think at this point, both the Iraqis and the Kurds are like, we're just interested in our own territory, These people who live in these mountains, they are not like, Iraqi Arabs, and they're not Kurds. They're more like ethnic minorities. So everyone is kind of like, well, screw them, they're on their own. And so Trevor goes to help them. And anyway, so there's a lot more I can talk about for that, but that will be for Act 2. And so I think that will be for another video. So yeah, so anyway, this is pretty much wrapping up Act 1. I think it's done pretty good. I like how Trevor appears in almost every chapter. He has a leading role. He has a clear purpose in the book. He has a clear direction. He's trying to help his friends in Mosul. And he's also making contact with the Kurds. And the one guy, Firat Mirazada or whatever, he's going to have a major role in Act 4. So it's kind of setting up that family. And we also get other stuff like with the Iraqi general who will be the one who attacks the Kurds in Act 4. So we're setting him up as well. And yeah, so anyway, I think that's about it for this video. I think I will do another video maybe if you guys like this video. I don't know, I imagine no one will watch it, but oh well. I enjoy making these videos. I like just kind of showing you guys an inside look at my writing. And also it helps me to talk about my books, because if I just try thinking about my books myself, I have trouble with it, but if I talk with someone about it, I tend to come up with ideas a lot easier. And I think the reason is because if I cannot explain things to you guys here right now, then how will I explain it to readers? So if I cannot explain it to you, I know it won't work. My idea is not working. I need to do something else. And usually the idea just kind of pops in there. So anyway, I feel this has been a pretty productive little session for me for brainstorming. So I like the way Act 1 looks. My main concern again with it at the start was that Trevor was threatening to take kind of a backseat role where these other characters the Iraqi general and all that, and Samuel Creed's team and all of them were more the focus of Act 1. But now the focus is definitely more on Trevor, which is good. That's the way it should be because it's a Trevor Knight book. He should be the central character, and now I think he is. And I think because of his character development, showing up in Iraq and he's pretty much suicidal, he has a death wish. Then he has the hallway scene where he rethinks that. And then in Act 2, he's going to have to, rethink his role again. And, maybe he will be more of a fighter, If no one else is going to fight, then maybe he will. And this bleeds directly into Act 3 when he goes back to Syria because he wants to take part in the fighting against ISIS. So at that point in Act 3, he is like, fully on board kind of with being a fighter. And then in Act 4, he goes back to like try to encourage the Kurds to have independence, and that's when he encounters a problem where the Kurds are not really willing to fight for their independence. And when the Iraqi military moves in to stop them from going independent, the Kurds kind of like back down. And so Trevor is like, okay, well, screw you guys. If you're not willing to fight, I'm going back to Syria and I'm going to, finish off ISIS and defeat ISIS once and for all. And that immediately leads into Atlantis Dislodged, where Kate goes to Syria to try to track down Trevor, because Trevor is here fighting with the Kurds. And that is basically all of the book, Babylon Dithers. That's kind of the whole plot of the book. But maybe in another video I'll go through Act 2 and fill these out. Because all I really have right now is that, I don't really want to go into this too long. This video is already long enough. But yeah, so basically, ISIS is attacking those ethnic minorities, and Trevor is like the only one who's willing to help. And there's more I can talk about, but that is definitely for another video. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'm sure no one has watched this video. It'll probably get like 5 views, and they'll probably all be from me. But oh wells, I've never done a video like this before. So yeah, mainly I was just curious about doing it, and I've never recorded anything off my computer like this before. This is the first time I've ever recorded anything off my computer, so this is a new experience for me. So anyway, that is it. Thank you guys for watching, if anyone did, and thank you. Hope to see you in another video. Bye.
2, 3, 4.